Go ahead. All right, this evening we're going to be working on Proverbs 10, verse 7. Proverbs 10, verse 7. There's a lot here. In the introduction, I on purpose try to, how do you say it, customize, so to speak, the introduction to each proverb we're going through. But it would be really, really important to tie all of that together with all of the other ones we've done for the past, say, 6 weeks or so, since we've been on Proverbs 10. That would be really, really important. Yeah, that'd be helpful. Okay, so on the front page there we have Proverbs 10:7. The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot. And then right underneath that, you have the Hebrew there with the literal translation above it. It's construction, grammatical construction beneath the letters or beneath the words there, and how that verse is built. So a descriptive literal translation here would be, the memory of a righteous one will exist to blessing, and the name of wicked ones will rot. So there's three key pieces to this that we're going to look at. We have a contrasting parallelistic structure. Two parts are synonymous. The memory and name, those are synonymous terms. And then the righteous and wicked, clearly in contrast, and blessing will exist to blessing and will rot, of course, is contrast. So there's a few things to look at. When we see that word just in the King James there, that's often the exact same word as righteous. Okay? So a just man and a righteous man is the exact same thing. Okay? And then we're going to look at the word blessed or blessed. What does that mean? And the name of the wicked, well, we know what the wicked are, but why is memory and name synonymously paired? Because that's going to give our big picture. And then blessed and rot are contrasting. So that's interesting. So we're going to look at that. The bottom of page 1, again, just for reminder, okay, is the thought or truth expressed in one line is basically the same as the thought or truth expressed in its parallel line. But the lines express their truths using words and ideas which are opposites or in contrast to their corresponding parallel elements. So you have to think of it as in a manner of two sides to the same coin. You have the head side, you have the tail side. They are both the coin, but they're two contrasting sides. Okay, so both of these lines is God's design. Each individual line is God's design. And the picture that they bring together is what we're going to be looking at here. God has designed it that the memory of a righteous one will exist to blessing, and God has designed it that the name of wicked ones will rot. This encompasses one design, one specific design criterion inside of all of the design. Let's go to page 2. So the introduction is what I was saying earlier, begins on page 2. That it normally goes all the way back to the Creator, goes to creation, the design of God, and then we get into the proverb that we're looking at. Yeah, if we can kind of encompass all of those in our minds and read over those, again, that would be really helpful. So, page 2, top of the page here. The Creator, the God who exists, designed creation to be a perfect and accurate revelation of who He exists. As He exists, God, who cannot misrepresent Himself in any way. So a key, there's many of them, but a key concept here is that all of creation is a perfect revelation, a perfect representation of who God is. God can do no different because He exists perfect. Perfect exists God. Man often has a picture of perfection in his mind of what he thinks perfect is, and then he tries to see if God fits his predisposed idea of what perfect is. Well, that's not how that works. God himself is what perfect is. His design is what perfect is. So, that footnote there, he exists, God, who cannot misrepresent himself in any way. We've gone to this before. But Titus 1:2 states, in hope, meaning expectation there, of eternal life, which God, that cannot lie, promised before the world began. And we could go into a myriad of texts, but one suffices. Again, that word cannot lie. It's not simply that God cannot say yes when he's supposed to say no when he's asked when someone asks him a question. It literally means he is a God that cannot misrepresent himself in any way, which means everything he does, from his thinkings, meaning his wisdom, to his physical creation, to that which doesn't exist, all of it is a perfect representation of the one God who exists, as he pervades it all. It all belongs to him as the creator, as the owner of it all. So, every expression of God, whether written, whether it's creation, whether it's in the heart of man, every revelation of God is perfect. It perfectly represents who he is. So he's not giving man an arbitrary set of rules to live by. He is revealing to man who he exists, and he's commanding man to exist in the manner that he designed them to, recognizing his ownership over them. So, thus, the Creator has set before mankind a choice to make. So, So he can't misrepresent himself in any way. Thus, the Creator has set before mankind a choice to make. Either cause firmness, which means to believe, to who he exists, or cause firmness to yourself as your own God. This kind of correlates with what we were talking about the other Thursday, pertaining to cursing and blessing and what God's design of that is, what his definitions are. Okay? So, meaning, every single one of us God's designed it this way. We constantly, at every moment, that's really errant to say it that way too. You could say at all times. But then that leads man's mind to think of specific times. But it's never ending. It's never ending. Because man's mind is always thinking. But what God does is constantly, we are constantly confronted with the ability to cause firmness to God by choosing to cause firmness to him, believe him, or we cause firmness to ourselves as our own God. One or the other. We're always doing one or the other. Okay, and there's a reason for this. It's really incredible, of course. Once again, thus the Creator has set before mankind a choice to make. Either cause firmness to who he exists. You know, we can't say we believe God if we're not obeying him as he's commanded us to obey him. Because to believe something is not some mystical concept in my head that's vague. It literally means to cause firmness to. So if in my mind I'm causing firmness that my God is exactly who he is, then my life will follow, not just externals but internal. The externals follow from the internal. You see, you cannot believe one thing and do another. What you do is what you believe. You could say, well, I believe God, but I'm going to go disobey, and I'm going to do what I want to do over here. But I still believe in God. No, you don't. Not in that matter. You believe yourself. You're causing firmness to yourself. You're not causing firmness to God. So very important there. So the second footnote I have there is Deuteronomy 11:26 through 28. The Lord states here, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. Okay? Here's the blessing. If ye obey the commandments of the Lord. So there's the word Lord there in all caps, meaning it's standing for his name, not a title, but his name. Your God, meaning your authority, your power, which I command you this day, and a curse if ye will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God. but turn aside out of the way which I command you this day to go after other gods which you have not known. Think about it. As the Israelites are turning after other gods, do you think aren't they going to say at the same time, well, we still love God? That's what we do, right? So we'll say that, but not our actions. So, meaning, at every moment in time, how do I say that exactly? So the Creator gives us the ability to constantly either be choosing to cause firmness to Him or to be causing firmness to self. This goes far beyond, of course, the bounds of my physical life. This originates in my mind, my thinkings, right? And so, am I constantly keeping my mind in subjection to the mind of God? His thinkings, what He thinks, His wisdom? Am I constantly in subjection to Him, seeking to interact in Him and with everything else around me in the design He's created me to? Or have I chosen to be my own God and authority and do what I want in any specific matter? Okay? So we always have this choice. We always have this choice. Every decision and thought process is an active choosing of either to exist blessed concerning the content of that individual's thinking or decision, or to exist cursed in that matter, and based on what you choose, you will reap the effect of your choice. So that is constantly the state that we're in. This is the design of the perfect Creator. He is constantly, at all times, giving mankind the ability to submit our hearts and minds to Him or to actively live in rebellion against Him. What I'm doing here is I'm pairing the two contrasts of the righteous and the wicked. Okay? Notice we're in the mind. We're not on the externals. We're in the mind. There is no such thing as passive rebellion. Christians tend to be very good at that, thinking that they're just being passive, right? But here's the issue. When you and I are confronted with truth, we can't unconfront ourselves with truth. When we are confronted with truth, with who God is and what He says, there's a fork in the road. We either conform our existence to the design of God in that matter, or we turn the other way and do what we want to do and be our own God. But man being man, he has to self-righteous. He has to explain away why he's not following God. And often what it is we try to take some sort of passive stance by on the outside making it appear like, now is just not the right time, or just explaining it away in a more passive sense, because we can't just come out and just be openly rebellious about it. But we're fooling ourselves, because we're at that fork in the road. It doesn't matter how passively you attempt to act on it. You're acting. You're either changing your mind to the mind of God, or you're containing your mind for yourself. That concept of passive rebellion is false. There's no such thing. Thus, the two lines of this proverb, like two sides of the same coin, reveal a single specific criterion of God's design and its creator-designed effect that either choice inherently has. Okay, so once again, really, really key to comprehend. He is the creator, and there's a reason why I'm putting these descriptive titles of Him in here, and His name at certain points. Okay, He is the authority. Mankind has been designed to represent that perfect authority in a finite manner to everyone around them, to everything around them, in all ways. There, okay. So the issue is that man all of a sudden wants to become his own authority. Well, he's born that way, but those are the two directions here. This proverb expresses the relationship that those who know or will know you will have concerning you. So, that relationship there, meaning what others think about you based on the name you have made for yourself. And the footnote I put down there is this thinking. Okay, what people think about you not only affects the one being thought about, but it also affects his family and friends in many ways. It also affects his God by what people think of him, including how they interact with you and how they speak concerning you. People automatically think that your family and friends are very similar to you, and thus what they think about you, they think about or tend to think about those around you as well. So you never either existing righteous or existing wicked. That's a factual statement. Okay? Because God's designed us to affect others around us. Okay? And its effect on their lives and your life as well. The first line, that line being, the memory of the just is blessed or blessed, the first line expresses the Creator's design of the impact of those who exist righteous. So what does that word just or what does that word righteous mean? Well, a literal translation of that would be straight. Something that's not crooked, something that's not bent, but straight. So the context here, of course, in the text is talking about what is, meaning this person exists, the righteous man, the righteous woman exist firmly planted in the design of God with nothing crooked, nothing out of shape. There's no bend. The only thing that matters to this individual is standing in the design of God. All of the individual's mind is given over to that God to exist as he's been designed or she's been designed to. We have a lot of Christians, and we've been righteous by our Heavenly Father through Christ. But many Christians don't live as if they're righteous because God calls us to conform to His righteousness because we're righteous. You see, so we pick and choose what we're going to be righteous about and then what our flesh likes, but not the righteous man. The righteous man ensures every aspect of his life, every aspect of his existence is seated perfectly as God designed it to be seated. It doesn't matter what everybody else around him is doing. So, very important to understand that word righteous. And in order to exist that way, the man or woman has to be continuously evaluating every new situation, every new interaction, every moment of their day, evaluating it according to who their God is and how their Creator would have them to interact in that situation. Meaning, we are to represent our God and not our own mind. Right? Our mind has to conform to the mind of God. So we're not to represent our natural wicked mind. Okay. The word memory here means to call to mind pertaining to that person. So the memory of the just is to call them to mind. Thus, when one thinks or calls to mind one who is existing righteous or one who has existed righteous, meaning they're already past, they're already home, the calling to mind of that person has a Creator-designed impact on that person's mind. You think of somebody's name in your mind, you already have a thought pertaining to them of what they are or who they are. See, it's not simply going off just their name. Like, if you call someone's name to mind, it's not just your mind's blank and you just have their given name in your mind. The person's character, his nature or her nature, right? Everything about that person is established in your mind. So, thus when one thinks or calls to mind one who is existing righteous or has existed righteous, the calling to mind of that person has a creator-designed impact on the person's mind. The righteous individual ensures that every aspect of his or her mind is firmly planted in the design of God, evaluating at all times to ensure that he or she remains firmly existing, causing firmness to the God who exists. This individual is existing in the blessing that God created every human to exist in. So if we go down to footnote number 5, I didn't write that in just due to the size of it. So what is that blessing? We've looked at this multiple times, but it's incredibly important to keep looking at it. So Genesis 1:26, so God is speaking to himself. And God said, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness." Okay? So those two words together, without getting too much into it right now, those two words together means an accurate representation of. An accurate representation of, okay? Let us make man in our image and after our likeness. And so, in what manner are we to accurately represent our God? And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So you take that synonymous parallelism, put it all together, and God has given mankind, he has commanded mankind to be an accurate representation of him to all that exists. God, once again, created everything that exists and then placed man inside of that design for him to operate it as God designed him to. Verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them. Notice, and God said unto them. So the blessing is what God said. And what God said, the content of what God said is the blessing. Now, this blessing is not just given to Adam. Okay? The blessing is not just given to Adam and Eve. The blessing is given to mankind. This is God's design for human beings to exist in. And God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So God designed man to be an accurate representation of the Creator to all of the creation. That includes self, that includes family, that includes animals, that includes the physical earth, space, all of it. All of it. So, meaning, we are not to represent self, like I said, in that manner. We are to represent our God. So, top of page 3. Top of page 3. So this individual is existing in the blessing that God created every human to exist in. And I've said it before, but of course it bears repeating. Every human being claims to want to be blessed. But what do they mean? They mean they want to sit back and be given something for nothing. The blessing God gave was commanding man to cause himself to exist in the design that he gave. Very important. Top of page 3. Thus, as a part of this design, this person is seeking to assist all others around him or her to conform themselves to the design of God. Think about it. If God designed us to accurately represent him to all of creation, that would mean, including for me to interact with others to help them know who their God is more accurately. Otherwise, I'm not existing as God designed me to. I'm not existing in the blessing. So, thus, as part of this design, this person is seeking to assist all others around him or her to conform themselves to the design of God, accurately teaching and guiding others in whatever area is needed in their lives. This is every believer's responsibility, so that they as well will exist as God has designed them to exist, desiring good for them, desiring them to enjoy that blessing that person's enjoying. Interacting with this righteous person has a valuable impact, and God designed it that way. This teaching and guiding may or may not include the verbal giving of instruction and guidance. When I say teaching and instruction, normally our mind goes to a setup like this, where people are sitting down and one person is talking and teaching and everybody's listening. Or it's one-on-one, you're sitting down with somebody and you're kind of instructing them and teaching them. That can be a facet of it for sure. That's a facet of it for sure. But for those who are seeking to follow their God and exist in Him, as we're designed to, all you have to do is seek to communicate with them as we're designed to. There's no teaching as we would normally think of it, but just the existence of that person, they see God's design through that person. They see God through that person. You think of the historical record of Esther. Why did she get picked to be queen? Why didn't all the others? There was something different about her. Yes. There was something. She did not seek to instruct in our normal way of thinking, instruct the men around her. Yet the men around her recognized something was completely different in her that the others did not have. Because she existed in the design of God for a lady. And they said, something's different. And see, that taught them, that instructed them. That effect is inescapable. It's inescapable. Just as if our life is filled with wickedness, when somebody says their name, they're gonna think about that wickedness about that person. But if somebody is seeking after the Lord and that person comes to mind, like, oh, you see, it's inescapable. Okay. Once again, this teaching and guiding may or may not include the verbal giving of instruction and guidance. Just by this person's interaction with others, they are seeing, receiving instruction and guidance. So they're seeing or perceiving the Creator's design for interaction. It is impossible for this not to have an effect. Thus, that memory exists a blessing to the one who called that person to mind, being that the person calling to memory is again confronted with the evidence of God's design enacted in the life of the righteous one who is called to mind. The word memory in the first line and the word name in the second line are in synonymous relationship, revealing what specifically is called to mind, the name they have made for themselves. So you have the memory of the just, and then you have the name of the wicked. So that's how this ties together. That's how those two things tie together. When you call somebody to mind, a name is involved in that, and the name of the name of the wicked. Okay, the name of the wicked. So that's how those two concepts connect. But again, it's not simply the given name. It's the name of righteousness. It's that name they've made for themselves, or the name of wickedness. And that can have a variety of factors and be looked at in all different shades in a manner. So, a person's name is extremely important. It is not some arbitrary thing that humans do to simply distinguish one person from another. Now, that's what When man controls something, when he ceases to recognize his God, when he ceases to be submitted to his God and to seek after his God, then naming children just becomes a bunch of consonants and vowels jammed together. And those consonants and vowels have no meaning to them but the name they're given. And a lot of times, good grief, you don't even recognize the value that's behind that name. But so names have meaning, but oftentimes in our ignorance, we can just see it as a sound. I like that sound. But it doesn't have any value. And so that's the humanized concept of it. But that doesn't belong to man. Who came up with naming people? God did. So that originates in the Creator. So God has a design for naming. We can go back to Genesis 1 and we can see how animals were named. We can see how humans were named. We can see all of these things. And so the Lord reveals his design for naming. So that's going to be very important as we're looking at this proverb. God, having created Adam, named Adam, and Adam named Eve. There's a lot here that we won't get into. It's not off topic. It's not a rabbit trail because it's all connected, but I'll try to stay very focused. God named Adam, because he was the very first Adam. There's not going to be another Adam like him. Adam is the name for human as well. So he's named human because he's the very first human. He's distinct. He's different than every other human being. So there's one. So he's named Adam. And then he named Eve. Well, why did he name Eve? We've gotten into that before. But you see, there's specific... During the naming, there is a seeking to God's design for the meaning behind that name. Okay? They then named their children and so on. The designer of all existence designed the use and purpose of names. Names were to show, in many ways, that the person named was under the authority of the Creator. As evidence, beginning in Genesis 1, names had meaning, and that name was extremely important. And so, meaning, when we call, and I'm not knocking on anybody's name, don't get me wrong, but when we call, say, Bill, well, that tends to be just sounds put together. But for instance, Methuselah or Methuselah means literally, in the dying of him, it will come. So their names meant something. A person's name stands for who they are. Every single person has many titles, and these titles are often used as names, but each person has many titles. They have many jobs. They have many responsibilities. Every single one of us does. Even a child has a brother. They're either a brother, they're a sister, they're a child, they're a niece, they're a nephew. See, they have a ton of titles, but they have one name, right? And that name encompasses all of those things pertaining to them. It encompasses all those titles. It encompasses their nature, their character. When a child's name comes to mind, what often comes to mind is if they're respectful or not, if they're, kind of respectful just about covers everything, doesn't it? If they're disobedient or not, right? So that child's character comes to mind. So there's much more that comes to mind with a name. Once again, but a title, job, or responsibility does not completely define the person, as these are simply individual aspects of who that person is. All of these are summed up under the person's name. Just as every person has a name, every person has made a name for themselves by their actions in life. And this name is what is called to mind when given name of a person is remembered. A righteous person has made a name for themselves. That's why you have the adjective righteous. A righteous person. How'd they do that? By causing themselves to live righteously. The word righteous means one who exists in the design of God. I explained that earlier. This doesn't happen by accident. This happens by submitting one's mind, one's existence, to the Creator in His design for that person's existence. The Creator is who defines righteousness. He's the one that defines righteousness. Because man, once again, we can have a really good religious system, and then as long as you believe these laws right here, that and all these things, then you're righteous in our eyes. Well, that doesn't matter at all. God's the one who's defined it, so it has to be under that definition. The Creator is who defines righteousness, and man is to comprehend and conform himself to that. Thus, when a righteous one, and very important, by God's definition, is called to mind, they are once again confronted with truth, a life being lived or a life having been lived in the design of God, and that witness causes firmness in the mind of the one remembering, and the instruction in righteousness that comes with having interacted with that righteous one, and the value that comes with it. The memory of this righteous person is valuable, as it continues to be a blessing to others and glorifies God even long after they are dead. In contrast, the second line reveals that the name of wicked ones that are called to mind have the opposite effect. The name they have made for themselves is wicked, and thus they do not accurately represent the name of God. They have lived their existence in violation of the Creator, and in so doing have caused the name of the Lord to not be valued or not be glorified in the eyes of other men. Thus, their name will rot. The phrase will rot is in contrast with the phrase will exist to blessing, meaning, unlike the righteous one whose name, when called to mind, is enjoyable as a sweet savor, thus remaining in good standing with others, the wicked ones, when their name is called to mind, exist as a rot, a putrid and unpleasant memory that one wants to separate themselves from as quickly as possible, or does not want to be affiliated in any way with that wicked individual, just as one comes upon a rotting animal and reacts and walks away. So these are the two differences. These two design criteria. Well, it's really just one design. So by existing in the design of God and seeking after our God, the effects of it are perfect. They're designed by God. They're perfect. And it has that incredible blessing, that incredible effect. But those who reject the design of God are not existing in that blessing that God gave. And everything they do, to whatever extent that they're in violation, is going to cause problem upon problem. And the effect that we see here is more of that, when called to mind, when that name is remembered, they're either shamed or valued. You have a very different picture in your mind when we say the word Hitler or George Washington. The name they made for themselves. Right? So, this number 6 here at the bottom, speaking of that sweet savor. So, unlike the righteous one whose name, when called to mind, is enjoyable as a sweet savor. Ephesians 5, 1 through 2. Be ye therefore followers of God as dear children. So what does a follower of God do? Walk in love, as Christ also hath loved us. How does Christ love us? Say again? Okay, but in what way?
In every way.
Okay, true. So we could go to many individual things and say all these things, but to encompass it as a whole, Christ loves man to the extent that he's always. How do I say that? Encompass that part too. Christ interacts with us for the purpose of man conforming to his design. Right? So how are we supposed to act? Be therefore followers of God as dear children, and walk in love so in the same manner, to the same extent that Christ also hath loved us. And here's more explanation. And hath given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling savor. Meaning that you and I are to be given to him to exist and walk in righteousness in his design, to exist a sweet-smelling savor. To that exact same extent. So you have these two, or you have these two lines of this one proverb. The memory of the just is blessed. Because when you call to mind a truly godly individual, by calling them to mind, they really don't get any attention out of it. When they're called to mind, it glorifies God because God is seen. But when you call to mind the wicked, it definitely does not. And so God's put that design aspect in there in creation. So, any questions? This is